Okay, well, good morning again, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for being with us here today for this webinar on safety data sheets. We're so glad that you could be here today. My name's Andrew Botar Dillon. I'm a safety coordinator with Group Management Services here in Central Ohio. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to you Scott Lenigan. Scott is a safety coordinator with GMS out of our Richfield office. He's been with the company for a little over 5 years now. Scott's a certified outreach trainer for OSHA. He provides OSHA 10 and 30 training for construction. Scott's also a certified outreach trainer for the American Red Cross for CPR, AED, as well as a forklift instructor. So Scott's got a wealth of knowledge and experience that he brings to the table. And he's going to be talking to us this morning about safety data sheets. It's a very important topic for compliance and employee health and safety. So without any further, I'll mention one other thing. There's the chat feature on this morning's meeting. If you have any questions along the way, go ahead and post those up in our chat, and I'll take a look at those and ask Scott as we go along, or actually we'll save those all for the end. But thanks again for being here, and without any further, we'll introduce Scott Lenigan.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Welcome again, everybody. Glad you could join us here today. So yeah, as Andrew said, we're going to talk about hazard communication a little bit with concentration a little bit on SDS sheets and their importance for the overall program. So let me see if I can advance my screen here.
You have the right to know and the right to understand the hazards of the chemicals you handle and how to protect yourself and the environment. In today's global economy, this vital information must be communicated even when hazardous chemicals move between countries. To establish universal standards for hazard communication, the United Nations assembled an international panel of scientists and industry stakeholders to develop GHS, the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. The goal of this training is to build awareness of the GHS container labeling standards, how to use safety data sheets, and how you can make critical observations in the field that contribute to the safety of you and your coworkers.
So a little bit of the history of the GHS standard. It was updated. The big update came in 2013, where they went away from the old MSDS sheets and went to this global harmonized system in the SDS sheets. So that, there's a 2013, workers needed to be trained on the new SDSs. By 2015, we had the standard finalized rules. December of 15, those compliant labels needed to be used and enforced. And then by June 1st of 2016, workplace labeling had to be conducted and implemented as far as our secondary containers. And we'll get into that here a little bit more. So we're going to kind of go through labels and other forms of warning in the SDS sheets, and then worker training today. So the first start is we need to get, or you need to get a inventory of all your hazardous chemicals. So it's important to have a master list of what you have on site or what you're using for your companies. Have that documented. And then also be able to realize that's a fluid list. So as you no longer purchase chemicals, you need to remove those from your inventory. Any chemicals that you're no longer using should be removed from the premise. You want to get rid of those. As you buy new chemicals, you want to make sure you have that SDS sheet. The SDS sheet, a lot of them can be obtained online if you want to do a Google search, or probably the easiest way to do it is from your supplier, asking them for the SDS sheet for the chemicals that you're obtaining. not only are these for chemicals you'll find in your environment, but it also can be solid objects. So if your company's grinding steel where we're getting a dust or mist, we need to have the SDS sheet for any coatings or the components of that steel, as those then can become hazardous. Also, grinding wheels. So if you're using a bench grinder or anything like that, we do need to have an SDS for those grinding wheels because, again, as we grind something, we're going to have those airborne particulates. So we really want to make sure we have all our SDS sheets for anything that can become aerosolized airborne particulates. And that's not, may not be just a one person job for the company. You may need to employ or ask workers of different areas, hey, what exactly are we using to make sure you have a complete list for your company? So compliant labeling.
Container labels are a fundamental element of hazard communication. Because they are in direct proximity to the chemical hazards, it is essential for labels to be GHS compliant so that workers can quickly access the information when needed. These labels must be placed on all hazardous chemical containers. The label includes the product identifier, the name or number that corresponds to the SDS and the hazard inventory. This may be the common name or a designation that the manufacturer or importer chooses to use. Pictograms quickly communicate the nature of the hazard and are easily recognizable by their red diamond borders. The signal word communicates the severity of the hazard at quick glance. Danger indicates a severe hazard to personnel, while warning is less severe. Hazard statements additionally describe the nature and severity of the hazard. Example statements are toxic if inhaled or ingested, or fatal if swallowed. A physical hazard statement describes a specific physical threat the chemical poses to facility personnel, equipment, or property, such as extremely flammable gas or pressurized container. A health hazard statement describes a specific health threat the chemical poses to facility personnel, spanning from mild skin irritation to life-threatening hazards. Environmental hazards indicate harmful effects the chemical may pose to the surrounding ecosystems. Labels must include precautionary statements. These are safety measures for minimizing or preventing adverse effects, including procedures for incident prevention, handling, PPE, storage, and emergency response. Finally, the label includes contact information for the manufacturer or responsible party so that further information can be obtained if needed.
And these are the labels that you're going to get primarily from your manufacturers. If you're storing them in large quantities, the few 100-gallon totes or large 55-gallon drums, and you're storing them outside or in an area where that label can get damaged or bleached out, it's important to monitor those and get those replaced if they're no longer legible and you're still using that container. A lot of places we're dealing with secondary containers. So we're transferring from our main container to most commonly what we see are spray bottles you get from Lowe's, Home Depot, or Ace Hardware, or the hardware stores, where we're pouring whatever chemical it is in there, whether it be Windex to heavy duty degreasers, anything like that. Those containers do need to be properly labeled. So they need to be labeled with the common name of the chemical. And then they need to have the appropriate warning on it, whether it be a pictogram like you see here, or the words danger, caution, warning. It's important. Now, they don't have to be printed labels. They can be handwritten in Sharpie. However, they do have to be legible. And with the Sharpie ones especially, or the labels again, if they get degraded to where you can't read them anymore, then you need to have them relabeled. Now, for containers where you're just using it for short-term use or single user, as long as you stay in control of that container, you don't have to label it. But if it's going to be used by multiple employees or for several days, then that would be something that would have to be labeled. Um, some industries, will have chemicals transferred by piping through from a tank farm or something like that to different buildings or various locations. All piping that's carrying those chemicals has to be labeled. Needs to be labeled in the direction of flow, needs to be labeled with what it is every 25 feet or after each different joint. So, so we know exactly what's there. Um, so, part of the compliant labeling we talked about are the pictograms here. Next few slides I have are going to be different pictograms, be 3 at a time of the 9, and the labels aren't going to match what the pictograms are. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to show these, and I'm going to give you guys just a couple minutes here to try and match them up on your own before I realize, before I show you the right match from the pictogram to the labels. So as you can see here, our 3 choices are flammables, oxidizers, and explosives. So the oxidizer is going to be on the left. That'd be the left pictogram. The explosive one is in the center, and flammable is on the right. Our next 3 are going to be gases under pressure, acute toxicity, and corrosives. So matching these up to the pictograms, the first one on the left is going to be our gases under pressure. Next one is going to be our corrosive in the middle pictogram, and acute toxicity is going to be on the right. So any kind of gases that we have, we also need our SDS sheets for. And that's going to be, for large containers, whether they be for welding or also our fire extinguisher media. We do need SDSs for our fire extinguishers. So you'd want to get those from the places that are servicing your fire extinguishers or the manufacturer. Our last 3 pictograms are going to be environmental toxicity, health hazards, and irritants. So when we go to match those up, you'll see to the left with the human body there, this is going to be our health hazards. The center one with the tree and the fish, and I don't know if that's water in the background, is going to be our environmental toxicity. And the one with the exclamation point is our irritant. One thing to note with irritants, I see those on a lot of SDS sheets that this compound chemical is an irritant. Everybody's going to react to irritants differently. However, a lot of them, if you don't react to it the first 100 times you use it or get it on your skin, your body still can be building an immune response to it. So it's important to protect yourself. It may be 2 years later, you've been using the same compound, all of a sudden you could develop a severe reaction, and rather it be a small patch of irritation on your skin, itching, discoloration, or rash. Instead, your body's going to have a huge immune response to that. And it may not be just that little patch on your arm. It could be your whole arm and up the side of your body. So it's important with those chemicals where we find the irritant marking on there that we are taking those appropriate precautions. We're using our long sleeves. We're avoiding that skin contact. So what is your role? We want to make sure our labels are all our bottles are properly labeled. We have a list of all our hazardous chemicals, and we've obtained the appropriate SDS sheets. So as you're going around your shop, please make sure to notify your supervisor or safety person. If you're missing SDS sheets or the bottles are not properly labeled, or you need to replace the label. So safety data sheets, our safety data sheets replace the old MSDS sheets. There are 16 sections to an SDS sheet. Then those sections, I'm going to highlight here in a couple minutes, 5 or 6 different sections that are extremely important for employees to know. It is the employer's responsibility to provide access to SDS sheets. It doesn't matter if they're physical copies or saved electronically, as long as everybody has readily access to them. So if they're saved in one section of the computer, everybody has access to it and can access a computer. Or if they're saved up on the cloud, they can access them through a tablet or their phone. It's recommended too that these SDS sheets are located in the area where the employees are working and exposed to that chemical. So if you have different rooms or different areas of your business where these chemicals are being used, it's important to have those SDS sheets readily available in that area so they don't have to travel to the front of the office to get them if there is an emergency. So also, if we're dealing with service trucks where we're taking chemicals out to another site, it's important to have those SDSs on the truck with them, or again, that access for employees to what they're taking out on their truck, so they have that information available to them if there is that emergency. So let me pull up here. I'm going to go through a couple of the SDS sheets that I pulled here. Bear with me a second here. Here they are. So the first one is just a normal everyday use chemical WD-40. You do have to provide SDS sheets for any chemicals, including lubricants, something as common as WD-40. You're going to see section 1 here is the product identifier with the name, who made it, and also an emergency contact number. If there is an issue with this chemical where you need 24/7 support. So section 2, and these are all labeled the same. These are all put the same since we went to the GS system. Every SDS is going to be laid out the same. Section 2 is our hazard identification. And it's a quick synopsis of all the information you're going to find in the SDS, just very high level. So it gives our pictograms here. It is flammable. It is an irritant. It goes into more warnings here. We want to protect it from sunlight. It gives us a quick reference here. If it's swallowed, we want to call poison control. And we also do not want to induce vomiting. Also lists some other hazards. Section 3 gives a mixture of what it is, what's in here. Section 4 is one of the more important ones as employees or employers to know. It goes into first aid measures, what to do if we inhale it. We want to move the person to fresh air and keep them calm under observation. If we get it on the skin or it saturates clothes, we want to remove the clothes and rinse the skin thoroughly with water. If we get it in our eyes, we want to make sure we're flushing with plenty of water for at least 15 minutes, remove contacts, and then rinse again. If our irritation doesn't subside, we need to seek medical attention. And lastly, with ingestion, we want to immediately rinse the mouth out with drink plenty of water or milk. We do not want to induce vomiting If it occurs, keep the head low and immediately transport him to the hospital. Uh, and again, it says bring along these instructions. So SDSs are also important to have out in the field. If you do need to seek medical attention, it's important to have the SDS available for the hospital because some chemicals will have specific instructions for the doctor on how they need to treat the employee. So also with this, you can see we need to have available to us plenty of water to allow for a 15-minute flush. So, if we're in the field or in our warehouse, we want to make sure we have eye wash stations available to us capable of doing that 15 minutes of flush. So, next section that's important to us, and I'm going to skip down to here, is handling and storage, making sure we're storing it in a cool, dry, well-ventilated place away from heat sources as it is flammable. Section 8 is going to be our next most important area to know about, and that's our exposure control or PPE. What PPE do we need to have to use this chemical? Again, it goes through our engineering controls, to minimize the risk, our personal protective equipment, depending on the environment we're in. Do we need a respirator? If we have, which we would if we didn't have adequate ventilation. Hand protection, want to make sure we're wearing protective gloves. And it actually specifies the gloves needed, which would be the Vitener nitrile rubber. We also want to make sure, as we're using those gloves, our contact time or our breakthrough, how long those gloves are going to be good for. And it's saying here frequent change is advisable. I want to make sure we have our eye protection, so we're using our safety glasses or face shield, and then hygiene, we're washing our hands after handling. The last section of the SDS that I want to go to is going to be section 11. And that's going to be our toxicology information. And it's going to go to what are our health effects if we don't protect ourselves properly and use this product a lot. Excuse me. So here, there is not a lot of available data, or the classification criteria are not met for the hazard. So it's not an extremely hazardous material for long-term toxicological information or exposures. So single exposure may cause drowsiness or dizziness. High concentrations vapors, spray mist are narcotic. It may cause headache, fatigue, or dizziness. So, and then we have our prolonged contact with our skin, redness, irritation. That's another important section to know. So want to jump to one more compound, and that's benzene. Just quickly go through the health effects on this. This one's, we're dealing with a little more hazardous chemical. So we have our danger, we have our irritants, our health effects, our toxicity. We have an environmental impact here, and it's also very flammable as we go through section 2 here. And then here are precautionary statements for this. Our PPE, we want to wear protective gloves, clothing, eye protection, face protection. If swallowed, we want to immediately call our poison control center. Our hazard statements here, it is highly flammable. It can be suspected of damaging fertility or an unborn child, cause damage to human organs, and it gives our disposal information here for the state of California. Jumping to our section 4 here, which is our first aid measures. If it's inhaled, we want to move the person to fresh air If not breathing, give artificial respiration and consult a physician. If we get it on our skin, we want to wash with soap and water. Take a victim immediately to the hospital. If we get it in our eyes, again, we have our 15 minutes of flush and consult a physician. If it's swallowed, again, we do not want to induce vomiting. We don't want to give anything by mouth to an unconscious person. We can rinse the mouth out with water and then consult in a physician. Yeah. So as we skip down here to
Scott, could we pause for just a couple of questions?
Yep.
Okay, Lisa would like to know, she's got two questions here. Can you explain where to find expiration date information? Additionally, how to dispose of expired chemicals. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily information that would be contained on the SDS sheet, but
Yeah,
I'll let you take a stab at that.
Yeah, so the first one is expired dates. Hopefully the bottles, hopefully the labels are still intact, but that may be a more call your supplier or manufacturer, maybe of a product with lot numbers if they're not readily available to you on the containers. As far as disposal, um, it's going to kind of depend on the chemical, what it is exactly, as far as proper disposal goes. We may have to get in touch with a company to dispose of those chemicals. So that one's going to be kind of a by-product basis of what it is, how much volume we have as well, as far as what the proper disposal procedures are. So that would be kind of more of a specific, more specific, and we can kind of address that on a case-by-case basis. And if she wants to get in touch with, we can talk afterwards, or reach out to her safety coordinator, and we can work through our possible what we can do with that.
Awesome, thank you. And everybody, I'll put Scott's email up in the chat as well. If you guys want to email him your specific questions about disposal directly, and we can kind of go over that information.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. So as far as our benzene goes, section 8, our PPE is going to be our face shields and safety glasses, and other garment, tested and approved by NIOSH. Our gloves, again, inspected before use, as we should be doing with all our PPE, avoiding skin contact. And to select the gloves, we want to make sure they're this fluorinated rubber with a minimum thickness. So this goes into the exact kind of PPE that you're going to need, for each product. Our body protection, could be a complete suit, FR gear, chemical flame retardant. Our respiratory protection, again, that's going to be, if we can't engineer it out, any administrative practices, then we're going to need to use the appropriate respirator. And this is prescribing a full face respirator with the proper cartridges with that. And it goes into what our exposure limits are. So, and lastly, the last section I do want to cover with this is section 11, which is our toxicological information. And here it's going to go into our acute toxicity, serious eye damage. It goes into our mutations. So there, if we're not protecting ourselves, there are some potential health threats. There's no data right now on the carcinogenity of it or reproductive toxicity, but it does have specific target or organ toxicity through prolonged or repeated exposure. Can be fatal if swallowed and enters our airways. So these are the basis of our SDS sheets. For some chemicals, they may be just a page or two to go through all the sections. Some of the ones, like you can see for benzene here, it's 11 pages. So as you're putting if you're using physical copies, you want to make sure you have a big enough binder to hold the information. Again, I may be breaking it down by areas of the company where stuff's being used. Um, so, so these are our SDS sheets. 12 gets into our ecological information, um, our environmental impacts. 13 gets into our disposal. So like our benzene here, we want it to go to a licensed disposal company. And again, local regulations can come into play on this. Section 14 gets into our transportation information on it. And section 15 and 16 gets into other regulatory information. And you can see here, it could be Chinese, different countries, or other information, could be different state regulations. I know a lot in section 15 and 16, see a lot of different statements for regulations for the state of California in their requirements with that. So it's kind of a general overview of our SDSs, what is required, what is found in those. So again, we want to make sure it's readily available to our facilities. Our employees, we're required to train our employees so that they know how to read an SDS, where to find the information that they need, where they're located within your companies, how to navigate those. So, and I'll kind of open it up at this point in time. Andrew, are there any further questions?
Yeah, we had a few that
Okay.
I looked into, and if you want to just touch base on these. One of the questions Lori asks, how often do the SDS sheets change or get modified by the manufacturer? For example, do you need to research your list annually to see if there are any changes? Um, just a quick review. OSHA regulations require that an SDS needs to be revised within 3 months after a chemical manufacturer or employer becomes aware of significant new information concerning the hazards of a chemical. So I would suggest at a minimum reviewing at least annually for updates. Anything you would want to add on to that, Scott?
Yeah, no, I would recommend annually. Hopefully, your suppliers are getting notified if there is a major update to them and will send you a sheet with your next order. But yeah, I'd recommend a minimum of annually, just going through to make sure nothing's changed.
Another question came in from Lisa. How do I find out local regulations? And if I heard you correctly, I believe you said that was section 15 and 16 of the SDS sheet that covers local, for example, state regulations.
It'll cover state, just depending on locations. Local regulations could be EPA regulations that may not make it into the SDS sheets. So we may want to consult, depending on some states, we'll have either federal EPA or they could have statewide EPA regulations. So we want to make sure we're taking those into consideration too.
Awesome. Lisa asks another question. For the chemical we produce, how often do I need to update our own SDS sheets? It sounds like they may be manufacturing a chemical.
So yeah, if you're manufacturing the chemical, your SDS should be updated if there's a change to your to what you're making. So if you have any significant changes to the components you're using, something new came on the market and you've switched out a component to make yours better, then you need to update the SDS. But if it's the same thing that you've been doing for the last 3 years, then the SDS should be fine.
So essentially, if the chemistry remains the same.
Yeah, but if the chemistry and the hazards remain the same, but if you change one of the products you're using, and then you need to change the SDS.
Gotcha. Lisa says that some of her customers have let her know that their SDS is expired. Lisa, I'm going to give you Scott's email address, and I'll let you guys connect on that and see if you can provide some additional information for Scott to review. If there are any other questions, if anybody wants to post those up in the chat. Brian says, if the product doesn't change, how long is it good for? Brian, I assume you mean the SDS sheet?
Yeah, then I would just, yeah,
He
if
says
it's,
yes.
yeah. So yeah, like I said, if it's, if you have all the information still there, that SDS is good until, there's a significant change in the product, or, um, if we, if it's found to have serious health, or where those health hazards have been, those standards have been changed. So,
And I think that important update of
yeah,
2015, where we moved to the globally harmonized standard, that was the last really big major one. So, I mean, that was,
right.
gosh, almost 10 years
So,
ago.
right. So, well, into the health effects of one of the compounds you're using, well, I guess, yeah, if the health effects to one of those compounds, we're finding that whatever compound is part of that product now causes cancer, the manufacturer then needs to update that SDS. So even though
Right.
that,
Completely
so
makes sense.
yeah, so not only, yeah, now that I'm thought that through for another second. So not only just if the compounds haven't changed, if the health effects we've learned scientifically that those have changed, then the SDS needs to be modified and updated.
So to bring it all together, it does sound as though there's not necessarily a hard, fast rule with these questions
No,
about when are they expired or when are they changed. It's going to be driven by changes in the science, in health effects, any other governmental requirements,
right.
uh, which is why it's so important to stay engaged with your GMS safety team, because as we learn about these updates, we can keep you updated and help you navigate the changes as they happen.
Correct.
If there aren't any other questions, just another quick plug here for the GMS safety team. We have safety coordinators located throughout the state of Ohio, as well as folks that cover locations outside of Ohio. If you don't know who your safety coordinator is, you can find that information under my support team in GMS Connect. If for whatever reason you don't have access to GMS Connect or can't find that information, you can always email safetysupport@groupmanagement.com. And I'll go ahead and put that up in the chat now.
I was going to say,
Um,
Andrew, if you want to
yep.
put my contact information in the chat,
Yeah,
that way, if
absolutely.
anybody
If you
has any
guys are,
questions,
yep.
yeah, they
And
can
if you
reach
guys are
out
in
to
the
me.
Cleveland market, you have Scott as your safety coordinator, but you can also reach out to him as well. I'm sure he'd be happy to help you, even if you're not in Cleveland. Alrighty, folks. Well, thank you so much. If there aren't any other questions, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We appreciate you attending today. Stay safe, and thanks so much for being here. You guys have a great rest of your day.